Hello and welcome to Business Week, the program that brings you top business stories that made the headlines during the course of this week, including special news features, market data, interviews, and much more. Welcome to the show. Here's the highlight of the biggest stories we tracked for you over the course of this week. On the local front now, electricity generation on the national grid plunged by 849.2 megawatts at the start of this week. Petrol is also expected to sell above 340 naira per litre as marketers plan imports amid forex crisis. And in the aviation sector, foreign airlines stop ticket sale to Nigeria-bound travellers. And bringing you more on the international front, global jet fuel markets stay under pressure as more countries expand border restrictions to keep the new Omicron coronavirus variant at bay. Shares in China Evergrande Group also fell as much as 4.8% after its chairman trimmed his stake in the cash-strapped property developer to raise about $344 million. And in Japan, retail sales rose 0.9% for the first time in 3 months in October, though less than expected, and the underlying private consumption trend pointed to persistent strains on fragile economic recovery despite an easing of COVID-19 curves. Well, it's now time to bring you some packages prepared by our correspondents. Now, in this first report, the strike force units of the Nigeria Customs Service Zone A has shifted focus from import to identifying exporter violations as it makes seizures of containers of unprocessed wood and charcoal. Well, this forms part of the 301 various seizures intercepted between October and the month of November, with a duty-paid value of more than 7.8 billion naira. TVC News correspondent Ibrahim reports.
The coordinator of the Customs Strike Force Unit Zone A, Amadu Shuaibu, is changing the narrative in his anti-smuggling fight. The later shift in focus to export irregularities has resulted in the seizures of 61 containers of unprocessed wood valued at more than 6.8 billion naira, 36 containers of charcoal, donkey's cane, a container of batteries that was falsely declared, and second-hand clothes, among others. The strike force coordinator says that the perpetrators of this crime are not only sabotaging the country's economy, but are seriously damaging the environmental framework.
They pay our farmers, our forest management authority peanuts to get this their act off. We are going to wait for them here. That so long as they don't stop, we pick. Come to think of it, look at endangered species. Because of its lucrative nature, because of greed, people have been killing donkeys in numbers.
Reiterating the threat to biodiversity and ecological balance, the strike force coordinator warns that it will continue to effect seizures of these items whenever they trace them.
Humans and forest and plant must live together. But this noble relationship, this robust relationship is being threatened by activities of criminals. Our role as a service does not end in seizures of goods and services. We equally have the national security role we play by ensuring that laws made by government are not only followed, but they are protected.
Deforestation and the constant depletion of endangered species remain a constant threat to the world biodiversity, which is why Nigerian government is being urged to initiate sustainable actions to arrest the continuous depletion of its forest. Ifunanya Eze, TVC News, Lagos.
And now in this next report, the Lagos 2022 Appropriation Bill is scaled second reading on the floor of the State of the House of Assembly. The money bill is now committed to a joint committee of the House on Finance and Economic Planning and Budget for further scrutiny. Abimbola Agbebiyi has the story.
thereby totaling a budget size of 1 trillion.
The 2022 appropriation bill of 1.388 trillion naira read for the second time 1 week after its presentation by the state governor. Tagged the budget of consolidation, the governor said that priority will be given to completion of ongoing projects, with 59% going into infrastructure development in the new fiscal year. This, the lawmakers say, is good news for Lagos residents.
It is a 16% increase from last year's budget, which was 1.16 trillion. Mr. Speaker, sir, any budget that focuses on capital expenditure as against recurrent expenditure is indeed a serious budget that is ready to usher in meaningful and sustainable development.
With road, education and environment taking significant portion of the entire budget size, there were projections that the merits of the money bill surpass its shortfall.
The implication of this is that more hands will be engaged, more job will be provided, and there will be more food on the table of citizens, and as a result of which the welfare of the people will be taken care of, roads attended to, hospitals attended to, and of course these are the basic concepts of governance.
The lawmakers were also quick to note that there is need for the revenue generation net of the state to be widened, with lesser emphasis on borrowing in the coming year.
What I think is having the budget is not just about writing it in the paper, but funding the budget is what makes it an instrument. If we check today, we understand that the people in the taxpayers' net today in Lagos State is barely 25%. And we have a budget of 1.3 trillion, and we're expecting it to be funded by IGR and other sources of financing. It is very important that we should look for means and measures within our capacity to ensure that our budget is being funded without excessively having to borrow or having to go look for it. We should look inwards on how to fund the budget.
I believe that we need to look at this budget critically and only approve what we are sure can be made. If there is need, if additional money is made, the executive can come back for a supplementary budget.
Shortly after the deliberations, the bill was committed to a joint committee of the House. Abimbola Agbibi, TVC News, Lagos.
Well, it's now time to also bring you the feature on the show today. We are looking at the project Nigeria Air, the intricacies and the reactions that have trailed this development so far. Don't go anywhere. Many thanks for still staying with us. Let's now deal with the crux of today's discourse. The federal government says that Nigeria Air will commence operations with 3 wet lease aircraft following the Executive Council approval of April 2022 takeoff date of the airline. The federal government announced at the start of this week it has sent out requests for proposal to investors interested in owning shares in the proposed national carrier. And as part of the highlights, Nigeria Air would be quoted on the stock exchange, adding that Nigerians would be allowed to buy shares in the airline that would be planned to commence operations with 3 wet lease aircraft. Well, joining me now to discuss this and more, I have Chukwuemeka Achum, Chief Operating Officer of Jet Support Services. Thank you very much for joining us on the show today.
Thank you, David.
Well, let's now start off with the build-up of momentum of the project Nigeria Air, the intricacies, some of the reactions we've had following the initial thought, the idea, the suspension, and then now the commencement coming into focus with a takeoff date of April 2022 with a wet lease of 3 aircraft. What do you make of the project so far and then the build-up of momentum?
Well, I mean, the initiative, like I said, is a very good initiative. It's a long time coming, and I do believe that government has decided to go the way of the private sector rather than fully funding this initiative. If you look at the investment sectorization, you will see that government has indicated that it would only hold not more than 5% of the total equity of the airline. I mean, that in itself is indicative that the government investment is purely catalytic and giving a lot of control by way of 49% to the technical equity investor and then 46% to the you know public. Speaking to the wet lease option, I mean, a wet lease traditionally is a kind of lease that enables airlines that are looking to either expand capacity in the short term or airlines that are looking to get off the ground very quickly. However, it is a little bit unclear how the Nigeria Air project is meant to get off the ground by starting off immediately with wet lease airplanes.
And now, talking more about this wet lease aircraft now, some analysts argue we could have taken a different route with other local airlines coming under the umbrella of a national carrier. What are your thoughts on these, especially with some also saying, well, the idea of a national carrier now is a misplaced priority?
Well, I mean, I do agree that if government is holding 5%, and it simply means that government has no controlling stake in this venture. Even if government has a controlling stake, government does not have the right technical capacity to decide, the type of airplane, the route structure, or more or less the business model that the airline would run. This should purely be the prerogative of the technical equity investor, which will be bringing all of his expertise into this venture. That being said, I mean, I believe the target for government is looking to target stage agnostic investors, investors who are willing to invest in, more or less any stage of the government, any stage of the venture, more or less. And somebody has to make a stake, and I think that government is still at the selling stage. So a lot of these public relations that we are seeing is more of attracting, prospective investors because we all know that Nigeria is a difficult place. Historically, government has not honored, strategic partnerships. We can look towards the likes of the Virgin Nigeria, even now looking at Bicotny. So government has not necessarily been the best business partner.
And then there's also the notion there, some are not necessarily optimistic about the takeoff date of April 2022 as a feasible timeline for the project. From training to recruitment of staff and other pertinent issues, and even the bigger picture of the fact that government with minority shares is also dictating a whole lot.
By means of the technical regulation, the Civil Aviation Authority requires a minimum of 90 days to process an air operating certificate from the date of initial pre-application statement of intent until the day of the air operating certificate issuance. The regulatory requirement is 90 days. I have never seen, or heard of any applicant that has completed that process in that, you know, minimum time. But nonetheless, the Civil Aviation Authority is supposed to be independent from the Ministry of Aviation, even though the Director General of, the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority is a parastatal under the Ministry of Aviation. You know, they are meant to, show or act independently, more or less from the Ministry of Aviation as the number one regulator in the country. However, David, we are talking about diversifying the economic landscape of this country, and we are looking. I mean, the call out has been that from sector to sector, that we see, enablement. Government should more or less enable businesses, enable FDIs, enable, private investments across all sectors of the economy.
Well, we are also looking at an open bid here for the management of the airline as government has opened calls for investors, insisting the airline would be run majorly by the private sector. Do you see this turning around the fate of the national carrier once established and then bringing to the fore the prospects we see in sight?
So I think in 2019 we contributed about plus or minus 12% to the nominal GDP of Nigeria, and the school of thought is that aviation can actually do much more. If you look at our geographical position, Nigeria is in the heart, not just of Africa, but it's actually in the heart of connectivity. You can bring passengers all the way from Southern Africa and connect them to Europe. You can bring passengers all the way from Western Africa and connect them to the Middle East. You can bring passengers all the way from Eastern Africa and connect them to the United States. You know, that being said, we've not, more or less taken advantage of our regional, footprint. And you see, Nigerian airlines have not really been, major players on the continental scene. Talk more of the intercontinental scene. We've more or less been local champions, carrying passengers all around Nigeria without any real, productivity or profitability. So what this, I believe, I don't, I can't speak for whichever technical equity investor will come into the country, but will drive this project. But what I do believe is that the aim is to, propel the Nigerian aviation industry or cascade it beyond, our current local footprint. We want, to see Nigeria play not just on the continental scene, but on the intercontinental scene. There's simply no reason why, we cannot challenge the likes of Ethiopian Airlines, Kenya Airways, and all of the other success stories out of Africa.
Well, it's now also time to look more into the area of operational efficiency and cost cutting measures, taking cues from existing airlines and other new entrants and their strategies to stay afloat. What are some of the blind spots you expect the management of Nigeria Air, as it's going to be formed, to look keenly into?
If you take an empirical look at why most of the airlines in Nigeria, I don't want to use the word failed, but why they've not been able to transcend their business beyond, our shores is very simple. Um, First of all, on the part of government has not provided the right infrastructure in terms of, the airports to support the growth and expansion of these airlines. Nigerian airlines are typically arriving and departing airports. There's no room for connectivity, there's no room to build a truly hub and spoke system. That being said, the airlines have also not really had, proper planning. And as simple as that sounds, David, that is more or less the number one bane of of most of the airlines in Nigeria. But taking a cue from that, I do believe that the first thing is that they have to understand the operating environment. I mean, I don't think that is something that they would take for granted or should take for granted. The number one, the top of the list for me would be understanding the operating environment, um, selecting the right aircraft to match the routes, putting the right people in the right places. And of course, government has indicated that, it will support this venture by now privatizing, the airports and allowing the airports more or less develop and support the business of the airlines. So um, it looks like it is coming at the right time, David. We are having intersecting, advantageous factors that will more or less look to, ensure that, well, not ensure, but support, the growth of not just Nigeria Air, but, any airline operating in Nigeria.
And still talking more about cost-cutting measures, we also have the prospect of the maintenance and repair overhaul facility in sight as well as part of the highlights from the national carrier coming in. 12,000 hectares of land will be used for the facility. And out of that land, which all of it is a free zone, there would be an MRO facility, a second runway, new terminal building, and various businesses. According to the minister, Hadi Sirika, it is going to be a whole airport city. How much of a driver do you also see this bringing down the cost of operations here in Nigeria?
It's looking like a one-stop shop, David. With this one-stop shop, it means that you know, I don't need to fly my airplane to Switzerland or America every year for annual maintenance. It means that Nigerian Airlines would be able to more or less reduce their dollarized subheads, which has also been a major issue with the sustainability of airlines. We've seen that the macroeconomic headwinds that the country had experienced between 2000 and 2001 up until 2021. In 20 years, we've seen a massive devaluation of the currency against the US dollar. So this has been a major issue. I mean, there's no business plan that can, like we've said before, hedge for that kind of impact.
Okay, now let's look at the bigger picture of aviation today in the country. We have also had issues around the cost of Jet A1 fuel. This has been a major issue domestically and also a contending global issue. And now we have the Omicron variant of coronavirus. How do you see the aviation sector building some resilience or shock absorbers to this new disruption? We cannot necessarily tell which way the pendulum will swing, especially with how things are going now and the the measures countries are taking in. Your thoughts on all of this build-up, worst case and best case scenarios?
I mean, the uptick in the price of Jet A1 is purely, factorized by the international price of crude oil. Government has completely deregulated the Jet A1 business in Nigeria. So you see, price fluctuations based simply on the prevalent price of energy in the energy markets. So that's something, of course, that is a huge cost subhead for the airlines. But at this point in time, it's not just in Nigeria; it's a global phenomenon. You know, we regarding the Omicron variant, it's difficult to classify it as a shock for us because Nigeria has a large footprint, geographical footprint, and you know I dare say that all of our airlines in Nigeria mostly have 80% of their business within the Nigeria footprint, and cross border closures and um, COVID. I mean, due to COVID protocols, are not really they're not really impactful in an airlines, Nigerian airlines operating the Nigerian airlines operating playbook because I don't mean to more or less sound a little bit, what's the word here? But the Nigerian airlines are local players, David. We're not even regional players. So border closures, intercontinental restrictions are not really are not really going to be a cause of concern for Nigerian players because most of their business is here within country.
Okay, now wrapping up the conversation, there are also fresh bans now that we've seen so far from travelers from Nigeria and other African countries to the likes of Canada. We also have reports of Omicron in the United States. Do you still see a shift in ground of having testing facilities at the airport as part of intensified safety protocols? Emirates has already highlighted this in their previous stance. They say we need testing facilities at the airports. Do you see a shifting ground for us in our airport infrastructure? And is that really necessary? We have to take seriously also our testing capacity and vaccinations, wouldn't you say?
Besides the issue with Emirates and the Nigerian government, I have not seen any other you know country issue a regulatory requirement for travelers to be tested at the airports before boarding or departing for their country. So I mean, that has only been the case with Emirates, and I believe we, even though we are not privy to the conclusive arguments between or resolutions between the Nigerian government and the Emirati government. But I mean, we've not seen the most recent has been, Canada, including Nigeria, in the list of countries with high risk of travelers carrying the Omicron variant. But even in this supposed ban by Canada, there was no mention about the need to have or improve, testing facilities at the airport. It was just simply an outright ban. So, well, I mean, the more testing capability we have, I mean, the better, of course. And on the part of vaccinations, I believe that the issue here is still, around sensitization. A lot of people still feel or do not still trust that. I mean, the COVID is here. A lot of people feel that the government. I mean, as you know, David, a lot of people are not very trusting of anything coming from the government. So, I mean, sensitization for me, vaccine availability, of course. I think that, of course, if the more testing facilities that are available, yes, the better. But to be honest, the current protocols that being employed by or deployed by the Nigerian government seems quite sufficient, to be honest.
Thank you very much for your time on the show today, Chukwuka Kachum. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you so much, David.
Well, just before we go now, here are graphic details of selected food price watch for the month of October as prepared by the National Bureau of Statistics. And on that note, that's it on this edition of Business Week. Many thanks for watching so far. To enjoy the rest of your weekend, I'm David Alabi. Bye for now.